Welcome to today's podcast. Our subject is unemployment, and our special guest is Melina Bassey. Melina is an HR business partner at EESI. She has 20-plus years of PEO experience working with industries such as retail, healthcare, and construction, and she loves to help small business owners find solutions to the kind of employee issues that keep business owners up at night. Welcome to our podcast today, Melina.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Melina, what do you think are the most important points for small business owners to know about unemployment?
I believe there's 4. Claimant's requirements, life and unemployment claim, involuntary versus voluntary, and the hearing, what to expect during that hearing.
Claimant requirements. What are the requirements for a former employee to receive unemployment compensation?
There's 5 requirements that claimants must meet all eligibility to collect benefits. Actively seeking work, available for work, able to work, state the monetary requirements, separation through no fault of their own.
Well, let's talk about the life of an unemployment claim. What's the time period? How does it work?
So as soon as the employee is terminated from their employment, they will file a claim with the state, and they can do that online. Every state's different. Here in Texas, they file it online, provide the information that they need to file that claim, and then that information is sent out to the employer. Again, every state has their own process. Here in Texas, it's mailed out to the employer receives it, and they have 14 days to respond from the date it was mailed.
So it's important to make sure that you respond in those 14 days. Involuntary versus voluntary.
There's 2 categories, involuntary and voluntary. For involuntary, there is gross misconduct, there is violation of company policies. So there's many reasons that an employee can be terminated for that. Voluntary is most likely going to be more of they resigned because they sought out employment elsewhere, they had to move, they give notice to the employer why they had to leave their employment.
It's very important for the company to have information or have some kind of proof that the employee left voluntarily, isn't it?
Absolutely. A lot of employers and managers, of course, they're the frontline defense and they're managing these employees. And of course, an employee may just say, I quit and walk out, or no call, no show, things of that nature that falls in that category. And it's very important to either follow up or show documentation that you have attempted to reach out to this employee, especially with job abandonment. It shows that you've tried to contact this employee and they failed to respond back to you. And now it's considered job abandonment. And it also shows that there was work available and the employee failed to show up on their scheduled shift.
Is it fairly common or uncommon for an employee that has voluntarily left or not shown up to try to file for unemployment?
It does happen, believe it or not, especially if they sought out another job for more money. The grass is greener on the other side. They work at this new company and it's not all that they thought it was going to be. So they decide to leave and they will file unemployment. And of course, all the wages that they worked is going to be under their previous employer. So that's who it's going to go to. The claim is going to be filed with their previous employer. And at that time, the employer is going to have a responsibility to provide the reason for termination. This employee resigned. They left for another employment. And here's the resignation letter, or here's the temps that it shows that I've tried to contact this employee and they didn't show up for their scheduled shift. What
types of involuntary severance would make an employee eligible for unemployment and what types would not?
With involuntary, the burden proof is always going to lie on the employer. They need to show the state that this claimant should be disqualified for receiving benefits because misconduct. They must establish that this employee was terminated because they violated a company policy, such as sleeping on the job, failing a drug test, falsifying records. And those are just a few of the reasons why they can be terminated. The reference, everything that's outlined in employee handbook is the key and the guide for the employer. That's what they're going to be using why the employee was terminated. And that's the information that's going to be needed when you're replying to the state is they signed this employee handbook, they violated this code of conduct, or they violated this company policy. This is the reason why they were terminated. And again, it's another reason why you still have to provide and keep proper documentation on the employee.
So it's very important to have an employee handbook, of course, that you follow. In the end, someone at the state level is going to determine whether this claim is eligible for unemployment compensation. What's been your experience? What do they generally look for? I mean, are there any keys that would be helpful to a small business owner to understand about the state and how they rule in these cases?
Once you're responding to the initial claim, you need to have all the documentation, the reason for termination. The more information that you have, the better it is for you, the less questions that they're going to ask.
And how has that worked for you in the past?
It actually works really well. Generally, once we are able to present our case to the hearing officer, and when I say a case in a hearing, it's conducted over the phone.
Okay, Melina, you've gone to the appeal, but you don't have all of your documentation in place like you should have. What's at stake for your company?
This can be huge for a small business employer because an average claim costs $4,322. But partnering with a company like EESI and working with your HR business partner allows us to solve these cases through our SUTA account. This is an advantage of our co-employment relationship, and we deal proactively on these daily employment challenges like this and allow clients to concentrate on their revenue areas of business. Unemployment can be very complicated to manage, and we simplify that process by responding to the initial claim and assisting through the process with documentation and preparing for the hearing.
Are there any additional points you want to cover that small business owners should know about unemployment?
Yes, ESI has a termination guide that's very helpful for employers, especially with managers that are beginners and they're into a new role. These are really great tips in this guide that helps you prepare for that termination, making sure you have the documentation that you need, checklists. There's also forms that are available for our employers that they can utilize to help them during that time.
Well, Melina, thank you. A lot of good information for small business owners. EESI has created, as Melina just mentioned, a free termination guide. And that guide has a lot of valuable information for your small business, for the person who handles these kind of issues at your company. And you can receive that guide by simply calling us at 210-495-1171. You can ask for Melina or anyone in the HR business department. Again, that's 210-495-1171. Or email EESI at hr@eesipeo.com. That's hr@eesipeo.com. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, part of our goal at EESI to help you simplify business.